some people complain. Continuing with the Pastimes of Lord Ramacandra, Canto 9, Chapter 10. Text 11. You're going to be hearing, right? Although you're in the kitchen? Yes? Okay. When Ramacandra entered the forest and Lakshmana was also absent, the worst of the Rakshasas, Ravana, kidnapped Sita Devi, the daughter of the king of Videha, just as a tiger seizes unprotected sheep when the shepherd is absent. Then Lord Ramacandra wandered in the forest with his brother Lakshmana as if very much distressed due to separation from his wife. Thus he showed by his personal example the condition of a person attached to a woman. We read this. And it's a long purport, which we didn't read. Okay. Text 12. Lord Ramacandra, whose lotus feet are worshipped by Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, had assumed the form of a human being. Thus, he performed the funeral ceremony of Jatayu. I think we read this too. Yes? 16. Okay, the bookmark was in the wrong place. 16. Okay. Shukadev Goswami said, after constructing a bridge over the ocean by throwing into the water the peaks of mountains whose trees and other vegetation had been shaken by the hands of great monkeys. We read this too, didn't we? Yes? Starting at 17. Okay, 17. After entering Lanka, the monkey soldiers, led by chiefs like Sugriva, Nila, and Hanuman, occupied all the sporting houses, granaries, treasuries, palace doorways, city gates, assembly houses, palace frontages, and even the resting houses of the pigeons. How they inhabit that? When the city's crossroads, platforms, flags, and golden water pots on its domes were all destroyed, the entire city of Lanka appeared like a river disturbed by a herd of elephants. When Ravana, the master of the Rakshasas, saw the disturbances created by the monkey soldiers, he called for Nikumbha, Kumbha, Dumraksha, Durmukha, what a name, Surantaka, Narantaka, and other Rakshasas, and also his son Indrajit. Thereafter he called for Prahasta, Atikaya, Vikampana, and finally Kumbhakarna. Then he induced all his followers to fight against the enemies. 19. Lord Ramacandra, surrounded by Lakshmana and monkey soldiers like Sugriva, Hanuman, Gandha Madha, Nila Angada Jambavan, and Panasa, attacked the soldiers of the Rakshasas, who were fully equipped with various invincible weapons like swords, lances, bows, prasas, rishtis, shakti arrows, khadgas, and tomaras. Doesn't say what those things are. A khadga is a type of sword. Anyway, text 20. Angada and the other commanders of the soldiers of Ramacandra faced the elephants, infantry, horses, and chariots of the enemy and hurled against them big trees, mountain peaks, clubs, and arrows. Thus the soldiers of Lord Ramacandra killed Ravana's soldiers who had lost all good fortune because Ravana had been condemned by the anger of Mother Sita. Purport. The soldiers Lord Ramacandra recruited in the jungle were all monkeys and did not have proper equipment with which to fight the soldiers of Ravana, for Ravana's soldiers were equipped with weapons of modern warfare, whereas the monkeys could only throw stones, mountain peaks, and trees. It was only Lord Ramacandra and Lakshmana who shot some arrows, but because the soldiers of Ravana were condemned by the curse of Mother Sita, the monkeys were able to kill them simply by throwing stones and trees. There are two kinds of strength, Daiva and Purushakara. Daiva refers to the strength achieved from the transcendence, with a capital T, and Purushakara refers to the strength organized by one's own intelligence and power. Transcendental power is always superior to the power of the materialist. Depending on the mercy of the Supreme Lord, one must fight one's enemies even though one may be not equipped with modern weapons. Therefore, Krishna instructed Arjuna, Ma manusmara yudhyacha. Think of me and fight. We should fight our enemy to the best of our ability, but for victory, we must depend on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, most of us are not likely to be engaged in battle like the Kshatriyas engaged in battle. But we do have obstacles of different kinds, or even striving to do something in this world for Krishna, and there's going to be obstacles. So the formula is clear. You make your best effort, and the best effort needs it to be successful, needs to be complemented by or strengthened by Daiva, or transcendental strength. And that's how we live our life. Now, the Vanaras, it turns out, by the indication of Brahma, even before they were born, is the demigods would create children who would have powers like theirs. So though they didn't have sophisticated weapons, they certainly had powers like the demigods' powers. They were powerful in their own way, minus the sophistication of technology and modern weapons, etc. Modern weapons of that time. Somebody just sent me today an article. I don't know how recently it was published, about a battle that took place in UP, a battle where the article speaks of Afghans, so soldiers from Afghanistan of some kind, numbering 10,000, invaded. First, they invaded, this is in 1787. They invaded from the north. They invaded Mathura. And then after invading, they very awful things they did, besides, killing innocent people. They did some very bad things without repeating the bad things that soldiers sometimes do. And they were, very powerful, killing people left and right, and plundering and raping and thising and thating and pillaging. Then they went to Vrindavan, and they desecrated places of worship in Vrindavan, 1787. Battling this and that and slaughtering this and that. And then they went to Agra, and they were victorious in Agra. And the king, the person that was the leader of their military force, thought, why not go cool the other side of the river Vrindavan? By that time, this story says the Nagababas from the Himalayas came to here, and they were fierce, and they were not afraid. So 3,000 against 10,000. And they didn't have weapons. They had sticks, but they didn't have sophisticated weapons. They didn't have horses. But they, had mantras that they chanted very loudly and fearlessly fought, and were severely defeating the Afghanistan, kept using this term, the Afghanistan army. And so the Afghanistan general brought some additional soldiers, and they were also defeated very badly. And finally, the on the field person decided to retreat. And as he was retreating, the Nagababas went after the people that were retreating and were letting them have it for what they had done, because they were, the priests and the ladies and the citizens and everything, they were treated horribly and killed by the many. So the Nagababas were wanting to give them a lesson that they would never come back. So they left, and they didn't come back since then. The day may come, they'll try again, but that's what happened at that time. And they had some Shakti. They were fearless. They didn't have sophisticated weapons, but they were fierce. They did their best, and they're depending upon some divine force to help them be successful. And they were successful. That's a more modern description. So we're not so likely to be in a confrontation, battlefield scene, but challenges are always there. And same principle holds. Thereafter, when Ravana, the king of the Rakshasas, observed that his soldiers had been lost, he was extremely angry. Thus, he mounted his airplane, which was decorated with flowers, and proceeded toward Lord Ramacandra, who sat on the effulgent chariot brought by Matali, the chariot driver of Indra. Then Ravana struck Lord Ramacandra with sharp arrows. There's a scene in Valmiki Ramayana where Ravana is approaching, and Ramacandra gives really strong instructions to Matali about, how to counteract Ravana's assault. And then he apologizes for speaking so strongly. Again, the mood of chivalry, he was not honoring the chariot driver, King Indra, properly, which is like in a mood of fighting. So he apologized. I didn't mean an offense. He was always observant of etiquette, even in warfare. Lord Ramacandra said to Ravana, "You are the most abominable of man-eaters. Indeed, you are like their stool. You resemble a dog. For as a dog steals eatables from the kitchen in the absence of the householder, in my absence you kidnap my wife Sita Devi. Therefore, as Yamaraj punishes sinful men, I shall also punish you. You are most abominable, sinful, and shameless. Today, therefore, I, whose attempt never fails, shall punish you." The Sanskrit for that is alangya viryaha. I, being all powerful, never fail in my attempt. And the purport: Nacha daivat param balam. That's in the verse. Translation: no one can surpass the strength of the capital T transcendence. Ravana was so sinful and shameless that he did not know what the result would be of kidnapping Mother Sita, the pleasure potency of Ramacandra. This is the disqualification of the Rakshasas. Asatyam apratishtam te jagat ahur anishwaram, from Bhagavad Gita. The Rakshasas are unaware that the Supreme Lord is the ruler of the creation. They think that everything has come about by chance or accident, and that there is no ruler, king, or controller. Therefore, the Rakshasas act independently, as if they, going even so far as to kidnap the goddess of fortune. The policy of Ravana is extremely dangerous for the materialists, semicolon. Indeed, it brings ruin to the materialistic civilization. Nonetheless, because atheists are Rakshasas, they dare to do things that are most abominable, and thus they're punished without fail. Religion consists of the orders of the Supreme Lord, and one who carries out these orders is religious. One who fails to carry out the orders, the Lord's orders, is irreligious, and he is to be punished. Prabhupada often used this comparison. In countries or in states, the law comes from the state, or comes from the government. And a law-abiding citizen is one who abides by the law, and an outlaw is one who disregards the law and does whatever they want, regardless of the law. Just as then there's the police department, and the police department gives protection to the law-abiding, and the police department arrests and punishes the lawbreakers. So similarly, there's, aside from man-made law, there's God-given law, and that God-given law is to be abided, and those that abide by the law, they're called religious. Religion meaning, one definition is accepting the laws of God, abiding by the laws of God as a religious person. And an irreligious person is one who doesn't care for the laws of God and they do whatever they like. And those that don't abide by the laws of God, they're punished by the laws of nature, the infallible laws of nature, because a government, man-made government, is imperfect. It doesn't always catch criminals, but God-made law is perfect, and someone violates the God-made law, and there's consequences, infallible consequences. So it's one of those things that in storybooks, a classic theme in a storybook is good versus evil struggle. The good guys and the bad guys. Virtue and vice. And virtue and those people that don't care at all for virtue. They do whatever they like. And so somehow the good guys win. But how do the good guys win? Because there's some protection from some higher authority, because those that are not accepting higher authority, they do what they like. They're not protected by that higher authority. In fact, they're punished by the higher authority. And it may be overt or maybe concealed, but the good guys win. So virtue will always prevail over vice, or light will always prevail over darkness, because light's stronger than darkness. And goodness is stronger than ignorance. Knowledge is stronger than ignorance. Goodness is always stronger. So therefore, don't stray from the truth. Don't stray from transcendence. Don't stray from the codes given by God. And you stay within the codes given by God. There's protection. There's strength. And it's a principle to live by. Then it's because of the atmosphere in which we find ourselves. It's not easy. And it's complicated. It's magnified by bad association. The bad association is people who don't know what Dharma is, and they do whatever they like, or they have their own idea of what Dharma is, a man-made idea of what Dharma is, and there's no strength in it. They live by their own ideas of what's to be done, what's not to be done, what's right and what's wrong. And that's the world in which we live. It's a world that's in a dark condition where people don't really know. And some people know that they don't know, but most people think they know. And then they act accordingly when it's actually ignorance. And that's a tough atmosphere to progress in a spiritual direction of life. We've been discussing, I still don't have an answer yet. The persons who I asked two persons that are very knowledgeable in Ramayana, how Dvidvida and Minda, who were sons of the Ashwini Kumaras and were assistants of Sugriva in Ram's army, and they did battle, etc., etc., etc. They lived a long life, and they became later corrupted by bad association. So how do they become corrupted by bad association? Before the bad association, they made an offense because of pride. They were somehow, doesn't give the detail, but they were proud of their strength, and they made an offense to Lakshman, exhibiting their pride and their strength. So with that offense, then they were susceptible to bad association. And the bad association came along, Narakasura, and Dvivida became corrupted and became really bad. One can be protected from bad association if one has a higher purpose of life and maintains that higher purpose of life, living according to that higher purpose of life. You actually know what higher purpose of life is. You are faithful to it, and you live your life accordingly. Even if there's bad association, then one will not become corrupted. Or say it the other way, one is protected by good association and having a clear sense of what the purpose of life is. So just stepping back, I have a device that's about this big, and it has all, at least purportedly has all of Prabhupada's recorded walks, classes, conversations, everything. And so far, I've listened to 1,150 classes and still counting. And how many times out of those classes did Prabhupada make reference to Prahlad Maharaj's statement to his father, not te vidu svartakatimi Vishnu, meaning most people, or people in general, they don't know their self-interest. Sva artha. Sva means one's own, and artha means something wanted. They don't know their self-interest. They don't know the purpose of life, the goal of life. The goal of life is to be happy, but when the goal of life isn't properly identified, then happiness means fill in the blank. Happiness generally, in very general terms, means enjoy your senses. And that's what happiness is. Here's the senses, there's an object, contact the object and get some pleasure, some enjoyment. And that's happiness, sense enjoyment. That is not what real happiness is. And it distracts one from the real sense of what real happiness is. Transcendental happiness. Happiness in terms of a divine love with the Supreme that then spills over into loving exchanges with others because of that prominence of divine love with the Supreme. And that's real happiness. Not knowing that's real happiness, people accept something else. They don't know. So therefore, one of the repeated, so many times repeated themes was from Prabhupada speaking, and we find in the Bhagavatam as well, what happiness isn't, and reorienting to what real happiness is. The futility of seeking happiness through senses contacting sense objects, and that's the standard of what happiness is. And defeating that, or eliminating that, destroying that misconception. Because even if the objects are there, the sensors are there, and they're interacting, it's not what real happiness is. It's something external, and in a short while, that buzz, that sensation is gone, and then something else is there in its place. It's not durable, it's not substantial. And then one feels frustrated because the circumstance doesn't change and the real happiness isn't there. So then frustration and continuing to search for happiness. But using the same measure of sense enjoyment, there's no happiness, no ultimate happiness. a higher taste of happiness. But even a small amount of that higher taste of happiness can stay with one and give one strength. That's a theme in the whole of the Ramayana. It's the whole theme in the whole of Mahabharata. It's a theme in all devotional texts. One more verse, text 23. So Ramacandra just severely chastised Ravan. After thus rebuking Ravana, Lord Ramacandra fixed an arrow to his bow, aimed at Ravana, and released the arrow, which pierced Ravana's heart like a thunderbolt. Upon seeing this, Ravana's followers raised a tumultuous sound, crying, "Alas, alas, what has happened? What has happened?" As Ravana, vomiting blood from his 10 mouths, fell from his airplane, just as a pious man falls to earth from the heavenly planets when the result of his pious activities are exhausted. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 9:21, it is said, Kshine punye marcha lokam vishanti. When the results of their pious activities are exhausted, those who have enjoyed in the heavenly planets fall again to earth. Marchaloka. The fruitive activities of this material world are such that whether one acts piously or impiously, one must remain within the material world according to different conditions, for neither pious nor impious actions can relieve one from Maya's clutches of repeated birth and death. Somehow or other, Ravana was raised to an exalted position as a king of a great kingdom with all material opulences. But because of his sinful act of kidnapping Mother Sita, and there are a whole bunch of other sinful acts that he did of violating women, many, all the results of his pious activities were destroyed. If one offends an exalted personality, especially the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one certainly becomes most abominable. Bereft of the result of pious activities, one must fall down like Ravana and other demons. It is therefore advised that one transcend both pious and impious activities and remain in the pure state of freedom from all designations. Sarvapati vinir muktam. Tat paratvena nirmalam. When one is fixed in devotional service, he is above the material platform. On the material platform, there are higher and lower positions. But when one is above the material platform, he is always fixed in a spiritual position. Sagunan samatityaitan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. Ravana, or those like him, may be very powerful and opulent in this material world, but theirs is not a secure position because, after all, they are bound by the result of their karma. Karmana daivanetrena. We should not forget that we are completely dependent on the laws of nature. And then he quotes Bhagavad Gita, Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankar vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. The bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by nature. Final sentence. One should not be proud of one's exalted position and act like Ravana thinking oneself independent of material nature's laws. Ravana was given many chances, many, even from his Rakshasa group. His maternal grandfather, even Kumbhakarna, certainly Vibhishan, many others gave him good advice. But, he disregarded good advice. He disregarded good advice, one can say, because his intelligence was blocked by sinful reactions. And another, one could say, his intelligence was blocked because he was blinded by lusty desire. It was enjoy Sita even at the risk of everything. And that's how it ended up. He could at some point, Ram said, when Vibhishan surrendered, because we talked about it in the morning class, when Vibhishan surrendered, Ramacandra gave the example of Ravana. If Ravana came right now and didn't even return Sita, but he surrendered, then I would accept him. Now, it's not just saying some words, I surrender, but if he surrendered, that's a magnanimous position. That's Lord Ramacandra. Now, he didn't give Sita back. And he was debilitated because of that, the reaction. Here it said, the curse of Sita, but it's, whether it's Sita said, fie on you all, you should be defeated by Ram or not. Just the very act of that kind of extreme sin, then very severely punishable. He lost his life. Although he was thinking himself invincible, he was convinced that he was invincible, even after so many indications otherwise. His intelligence was gone. A really nice scene in Chitrakoot. You familiar with Ramayana a little bit? Somewhat? You know where Chitrakoot is? When Ram left Ayodhya, it was suggested by Bharadraj Muni that he could stay at Chitrakoot. It'd be a nice place. And not far from the ashram of Valmiki. So he left Bharadraj's ashram. He met Valmiki. Officially, they met. And then he went to Chitrakoot. So while in Chitrakoot, that's where Bharata wanted to convince Ram to return. And after he tried and Ram wouldn't return. He was going to fulfill the word of his father, etc. And Bharata returned with his shoes. Privately, there's a little passage where Kaikeyi had an opportunity to speak directly with Ramacandra. And she gave a full apology for her wrongdoing. I don't know what overcame me, and this is abominable, and I have profound regret, and please forgive me, and all those things. Ramacandra said, Kaikeyi, it was I who inspired your heart to do those things. So don't blame yourself. You're not to be blamed. I don't blame you, and others shouldn't blame you. And why did Ram inspire the heart of Kaikeyi to say the things she said, which ended up in the death of Dasarath because of separation from Ram? Well, there was a whole other set of leelas for Ramchandra to perform. His purpose in coming into the world to give shelter to the devotees of the Lord, the sages that were in the forest, and to kill the demons. And she, Kaikeyi, was an instrument in at least one part of those. Go to the forest and give his association to the sages in the forest. So it was part of his plan. There was other things, so many other things. The accelerating the feelings of separation, of love and separation. That's a whole science, spiritual science of the emotion of sorrow. It looks like a bad emotion. And in relation to Lord Ramachandra, it's an ecstasy. That's a spiritual science. It's one of the secondary rasas. When there's an obstacle in being with the object of love, then there's sorrow. It enhances the primary rasa of being with the beloved, the object of service. Obstacles create negative emotion. This is in the science of rasa, but it works in practical life too. Supposing it won't happen. Supposing life was bump-free, everything just happened really nicely. Supposing. It's not like that, but supposing. There may be periods of time where things seem to be going very nicely, and it's lovely. And then when things don't go nicely, or there's some obstacles in things going nicely, then some other feelings start to intensify. And especially for theistic people, their feelings of calling upon the Supreme, calling upon God, calling upon Ramachandra, calling upon higher spiritual authority, it's intensified. And that's nice. The circumstance may not be nice, but the consequence of the circumstance is nice. And then when the circumstance is removed, then it's nice again. So the affairs of spiritual life are like that. It's kind of looking out your window. There's this pretty big pond with a big fountain out there. Does it go all year round, that thing? So, there's water splashing and pools of water being, the surface of the water is not calm like a calm lake. It's got its little waves and the wind and rivulets from the pouring water that comes pouring down. But it's a nice scene. And when there's obstacles in Ramayana and when there's obstacles in life, we don't like challenges, but on the other hand, it increases our strength or intensity of endeavor, and it increases our dependency upon the Supreme, upon Krishna or Ramachandra, and that's good. That's part of the way of spiritual life. So we don't want a bump-free existence. We want an existence where we don't forget Krishna. And things that help us strengthen that dependence and remembrance of Krishna, that's good. Okay, that's it for this discussion. This is still chapter 10. I don't know how it's going to work for the remainder of time. It goes through 10 and 11. Yeah. Chapter 12 is the dynasty of Kusha, the son of Ramacandra, Love and Kush. We may be able to finish by the time Ram Navami comes next week. Any discussion?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So Krishna says, Sarva Dharman Pritejya, so abandon everything, all religion, and surrender unto me. I heard in one of the lectures, I don't know, it's probably from Ramayana, where Ram says that even if you say once that I surrender unto you, I will give you my shelter. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also doesn't look for any qualifications. He says, just, chant Hare Krishna and, I will take care of you. So in these three different personalities of Godhead, Krishna seems to be most demanding, or he seems to be more stern. He's asking you to, us to give up everything and then surrender unto him. So my question is, so just like we are following Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so can we also follow Lord Ramachandra? Just like he's saying, we can, even if you once say that I surrender unto you, Lord Ram, he will take care of us.
Well, your question is a classic question in Sri Vaishnavism. You're aware, right?
No.
Are you aware that in the course of time after Ramanujacharya, there was a major disagreement between two successive acharyas, several generations later? But the difference, one of the primary differences was how to understand this. Is it a one-time event or is it an ongoing submission? And some said this and some said that, and there was a split, ideological split. And although Lord Chaitanya didn't demand surrender as a condition for chanting, but without surrender, the chanting isn't going to, surrender becomes inspired in the course of chanting, but it's not that there's no surrender required. There is Sharanagati in the life of devotion to Lord Chaitanya. So our largely our Gaudiya Vaishnava teaching is it's not just a one-time event. There's submission, and then there's ongoing submission. And that's our practical experience as well. One can be very enthusiastic and feel inspired in various ways of describing that, and feel spiritually enriched and full. Some time passes and complacency sets in, and it doesn't feel the same. And it starts to getting a little rough again. That's our practical experience. So those that are On the spontaneous platform, now we're speaking about the teachings of the followers of Lord Chaitanya, that there's the regulative and then there's the spontaneous. And when the spontaneous, there doesn't take a cause. I want shelter and therefore I'm going to surrender, because if I take shelter, then I get protection. And I want protection. So I'll surrender because I want protection. So when there isn't some cause, but it's spontaneous shelter taking, that's what we aspire for. So now back to your question. That the making the differentiation that you just made, that there's what Krishna said, there's what Ramacandra said, and there's what Lord Chaitanya said. It's a bit of an oversimplification of what they said. And then there's a difference of interpretation of what they said, particularly with Ramacandra. Then and how that applies to us, you and me, and the rest of us here. At least my understanding is it's not a one-time event, it's an ongoing submission. And one who has that ongoing submission, they're always protected. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate samati saganan samati chaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. When it once achieves the Brahman platform, Brahma bhuyaya, or the Brahma Bhuta stage. But then one can check out. And then when again, the modes are acting. And one is influenced by one's prior conditioning. And that we see and experience. So in response to your question, those three differentiations are a little oversimplified. And what we need to do is have ongoing submission. Ultimately to the spontaneous stage, where it's not, a disconnect, becoming connected, but we're just connected spontaneously. Now you have something? No? You had your hand up? No. Okay. Others? How about our host? Anything?
Hare Krishna.
Hare
So,
Krishna.
like I always had this worry, reading about Mahabharata and all that to our kids growing up. There's always so much about war and fights and stuff like that.
Too much.
There was always this fear that if I'm going to read all this to my little child, he's going to start thinking about war and fights and all. So how do you overcome that situation and kind of throw that light on what our culture is? So that has been dilemma. And for me now, my kids are grown up, but so close to the religion, and they want to kind of explain or read all these things to their child. How do you overcome, or how do you explain your child that, this had to be done because of the situation?
Well,
so it's a deep question, but
it a lot depends upon your child and the relationship with the child, how you explain.
Yeah.
But there's some principles that make it a little, frame the presentation in terms of, ideally, nonviolence is a good principle to live by. However, there are persons in the world who will violate others, and that needs to be checked. So there's some circumstances where violence unto others has to be checked up to the point of using, great strength. but it's not to be used otherwise. Not to be used otherwise. But when there, at times of, according to Dharma, there's principles that is needed to get protection. So there are these situations in Ramayana, in Mahabharata, where there's descriptions of fighting because they're kings and they're duty bound to get protection, and they're trained when and what circumstances and how to get protection, because that's their duty in life. But supposing we just have some nice narration about some brahmanas, so we just read some nice narration about brahmanas, and they don't do fighting. They have other principles that they live by. So it's, you create a bigger picture, and this exists over here because there are people in the world that will harm others unnecessarily. And when those people are acting up, some section of society needs to protect the innocent. That's it. So it has its place. And let's read some of the other sections. But when we read the other section, that's not the whole picture. That fighting is part of the picture. Again, it depends on the individual.
Yeah, it's just that we are trying to promote,
Proper
try to
life.
do everything with peace and stuff, and that was always the fear.
Put it when that it's in the world. Supposing you don't read about it, it's in the world. Where is there a proper place for any of that, or do you just trash it? There's a proper place. What's the proper place? Protecting innocent people and protecting religious principle. There's a place. And other than that, it's, there's, the sword is in the sheath. It's there in case it's needed, and otherwise it's in the sheath. And then those that live by those codes, they're highly cultured, and they know how to associate with one another and others from other backgrounds in very sophisticated, proper ways. Let's learn about that, how to mix with people that aren't doing aggressive acts to others. And that's ideal. We learn, and then if those that have that capacity, they get protection. I don't think it provides protection to not read those sections of Ramayana or Mahabharata, because it might promote violence. There's a world in which we live, there's plenty of it, and young people growing up see it. And how do you deal with it? That is you just trash it? Just a little sharing. It's like your question is bringing to mind something that happened in my college days. In my college days, it was during the Vietnamese War. And there was a lot of anti-war protest, peace and love and flowers and anti-war protest. During a certain point in time, there was a group of students that had an acronym, Students for a Democratic Society, SDS. And I don't know how it happened, but they forcibly took over the administrative building of the campus, and they went and burned down the ROTC building, Reserve Officer Training Division. They burned the building down, and they were demanding of the university some changes. So I sat in the middle of this and watched what was going on, and I thought, these people are going to be worse than those people. They're using violence in the wrong way, and they're just going to replace violent people with their own brand of violence. I don't want anything to do with it. I'm checking out. I want another solution. So it's now reading Bhagavad Gita, but there's a proper use of it. And otherwise it's not. And the platform of using it is, very controlled and disciplined and principled. In a modern context, it's, police violence. So some people defund the police, but that's not a solution. That'll just invite criminals to go bonkers. So how to have proper police to give proper protection and proper principle, not just be strong. And now that I have strength and a badge, I can use that power in an abusive way. That's what people object to. Because they don't have training. So I understand the concern that you expressed, that it's a matter of establishing foundational principles of life. And then where is strength appropriate and where is gentleness appropriate? Because some people say, if you act gently, people will take advantage of you. So don't be gentle, because people take advantage of you. So then what are you going to be? You're going to be a monster. Then people won't take advantage of you. That's not the principle to live by. So what are principles to live by? Is there a place for exercising strength according to dharmic principles? Yes. If you understand the essence and message, then you can convey it to your son or sons or dependents or others. And when they get, carried away this way or carried away that way, you can balance it out just by, why is it there? And why is the other thing there when it isn't there? Because people are cultured. And they know when to use a thing and when not to. Anything? You want to take part in this discussion with any comment?
Thank you, Prabhuji. That was good explanation.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Yesterday after the afternoon class, when we were coming back, Shreyas had a question regarding Maricha.
You had the question? What's the question?
Maricha knew that getting killed by Rama was better than getting killed by Ravana. By the time Ravana was asking him to come as a deer, and then he said he will kill if at all he doesn't go. So Maricha knew already that getting killed in Rama's hand is better than killing it. So why did he scream out the names of Sita and Lakshmana?
That's a very clear, good question, a very clear answer. He wanted Ravana to be killed. And the way to get Ravana killed was, the sequence of events that happened. And it resulted because Ravana's plan was to kidnap Sita, such a wicked person. He wants better that I'm killed by Ram than by Ravana, and better Ravana is killed by Ram. Let him do this diabolical thing, so he'll be killed by Ram. It was kind of a mix of get back at Ravan, but also, let Ravana be cleansed by being killed by Ram. He wasn't afraid of Ravana. He was able to talk back to him in very direct manner. And he was a mystic personality. But he knew that Ravana was powerful and would surely follow through and kill him. So better to be killed by Ram. And better that Ravana is killed by Ram too. And that was a way to ensure it. Because if he hadn't, then it wouldn't have happened. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.